The city was dying. Smoke curled above broken towers, and the streets echoed with the distant hum of enemy ships. Humans had already evacuated most of their people, but the war had spread too far and too fast. The last soldiers moved in small groups, helping survivors to escape. In the chaos, no one noticed the girl sitting in the shadow of a collapsed building. She was not human. Her skin was pale violet, covered with patches of dust and dried mud. The thin ropes that held together. Her worn clothes looked ready to break at any moment. She kept her knees close to her chest, her eyes scanning every movement with quiet fear. People passed her without a glance. Those who came near wrinkled their noses and turned away quickly. She had been living in the ruins for too long, hiding from both the invaders and the people who might harm her. Her name was Liora. She had once lived in a busy alien settlement on the far side of the planet, but the war had burned her home first. She had walked for days, avoiding the main roads until she reached this city, but here she was met with rejection. No one wanted to help a girl who looked strange, smelled of weeks without clean water, and could not speak their language well. Group of human civilians hurried past her now, led by a soldier in dusty armor. His helmet visor was up, revealing a tired but sharp-eyed face. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried his weapon with the ease of long habit. His boots slowed as he passed her hiding spot. For a moment, their eyes met. Hers were wide, golden, and desperate. His narrowed slightly as if he was deciding whether she was worth the trouble. Liora lowered her gaze quickly. She had learned not to expect kindness. But the soldier didn't move on. He stepped closer, crouching to her level. She froze, ready to run if he shouted at her. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice deep and calm. "Are you alone?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. His eyes scanned her condition, the bruises, the dust, the way her ribs showed under her clothes. He knew she wouldn't survive much longer like this. He extended his hand, palm up. At first, she didn't move. She glanced at the street, wondering if this was some trick. But his expression didn't change. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her stand. The smell that made others turn away hit him too, but he didn't flinch. "Come on," he said. "You're coming with me." He led her through the streets, staying close to walls and avoiding patrols of enemy drones. Every so often, she stumbled, and he caught her before she could fall. She didn't know why he was helping her. She only knew that for the first time in weeks, someone was looking at her like she mattered. They reached a small building hidden behind a pile of rubble. Inside, it was dim but warm. There was a water tank in the corner and a narrow cot pushed against the wall. He set his rifle down and gestured for her to sit. "You need to clean up before we move anywhere else," he said. He filled a metal basin with water, handing her a small cloth. "Take your time, I'll keep watch outside." She stared at the basin as if it were something rare and precious. Her fingers trembled when she touched the water. It was cool against her skin, washing away the dirt and the smell that had clung to her for so long. She worked slowly, afraid to waste a single drop. When she was done, she looked into the water and barely recognized her reflection. Her violet skin shone faintly again, and her golden eyes looked brighter. She didn't know how long this soldier would keep her safe, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time, hope. Outside, the man kept his eyes on the ruined street. He didn't know who she was or where she came from. All he knew was that leaving her there to die wasn't an option. Somewhere in the distance, the low roar of enemy engines began to grow louder. He knew their time in the city was running out. The engines were getting closer. The soldier, his name was Kade, stayed low near the doorway, scanning the street with sharp eyes. Liora sat quietly on the cot, clutching the cloth he had given her. She had no idea where they would go next, but she understood enough to know they couldn't stay here. Kade stepped back inside. "We move now," he said firmly. She rose to her feet, still unsure if she could keep up with him. He handed her a small canteen of water and a dry ration bar. She took them silently, eating quickly. They slipped into the street, moving through the shadows. Kade's movements were careful but fast, his hand often motioning for her to follow close. The city felt emptier than before. Most survivors had already left, and the air smelled faintly of smoke and scorched metal as they turned a corner. The distant engines grew into the sharp whine of enemy scout flyers. Kade pulled her into an alley, pressing her back against the wall. His hand rested on her shoulder, holding her still as a sleek black flyer passed overhead, scanning the ruins with a red light. Liora's heart pounded, but she stayed quiet. When it was gone, Kade nodded and moved again. They crossed broken streets, climbed over piles of debris, and ducked into half-collapsed buildings. She was slower than him, but he never left her behind. Finally, they reached a hidden tunnel entrance, covered with a sheet of metal and loose bricks. Kade lifted the cover and gestured for her to go in first. She hesitated, glancing into the darkness. He gave her a reassuring nod. "Safe way out," he said simply. The tunnel smelled damp and earthy, the floor uneven with rubble. Liora followed the dim light of Kade's small flashlight. The sound of the war outside faded as they moved deeper. She realized this was the first time in days she didn't feel exposed. After a while, the tunnel widened into a small underground room. There were crates stacked against one wall, and in the center, a portable heater flickered weakly. Kade set his pack down and checked his weapon. "We'll rest here for a bit," he said, his voice calm. Liora sat near the heater, feeling its faint warmth on her skin. She watched him as he worked, cleaning his rifle, checking the contents of his bag, and sipping from his canteen. He moved with the quiet discipline of someone used to danger. After a moment, he looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "Liora." He repeated it, making sure he pronounced it right. "I'm Kade," he said. The sound of his name felt strange but safe in her mind. They didn't speak much after that. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a shield between them and the chaos above. But Liora's thoughts were busy. She had been alone for so long that she had almost forgotten what it was like to have someone beside her. Kade finally stood. "We can't stay here long. My unit's extraction point is north, beyond the river. I'll take you there." Her eyes widened. "With you?" He gave a short nod. "You'll be safer." They packed up quickly and moved on. The tunnel stretched far under the city, leading them to a hidden exit near the outskirts. Kade checked the outside carefully before stepping into the open. The air here was fresher, the noise of battle distant as they walked. Liora noticed the way he kept adjusting his pace to match hers. Even when she stumbled on loose stones, he stayed close, steadying her without a word. She realized he was not helping her out of pity. He was helping because he had decided she mattered. By the time the sun began to set, they reached the edge of the river. The bridge ahead was damaged. One side collapsed into the rushing water below. Kade scanned it quickly, then began leading her across the remaining structure. Halfway over, they heard the distant roar of engines again, not enemy this time, but human dropships. Kade's eyes sharpened. "We're close," he said. Liora's chest tightened. She didn't know what waited for her at this extraction point, but she knew one thing: she didn't want to be left behind again. Kade noticed her worried look and gave a rare, faint smile. "I'm not letting you go," he said quietly. The dropships were still far away, their sound rolling over the broken land like distant thunder. Kade quickened his pace, and Liora followed, clutching the strap of the small pack he had given her. The air was cooler now, the sky turning gold and red as the sun sank behind the horizon. They crossed the rest of the damaged bridge, stepping carefully over gaps in the metal. On the far side, the land opened into wide fields dotted with the remains of old machinery. Some were half buried in dirt, rusted from years of neglect. Liora's eyes moved constantly, searching for signs of danger. Kade led her toward a line of low hills. "We'll move through there," he said, pointing ahead. She nodded, trusting his judgment even if she didn't fully understand his plan. As they walked, Liora's mind kept returning to the moment he had first stopped for her. Dozens of people had passed her by, but this man, this human, had chosen to see her. She didn't know why, but she could feel that his decision had already changed her fate. The sound of the dropships grew louder, and Kade slowed, signaling her to stop. They crouched behind a pile of fallen stone. In the distance, through a gap in the hills, she could see the faint glow of landing lights. "That's our way out," Kade murmured. "But there's one problem." She tilted her head, waiting for him to explain. "They won't let you on without clearance," he said. "And right now to them, you're just an unknown alien. They'll see you as a risk." Liora's stomach tightened. "Then, I can't go?" she asked quietly. Kade looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "I'll make sure you can." They moved closer, keeping low. The landing zone came into view. 3 dropships sitting on scorched ground, their engines kicking up clouds of dust. Human soldiers in armor moved in steady lines, helping civilians aboard while scanning the area for threats. Kade stopped just before they reached the open space. "Stay close to me. Don't speak unless someone asks you a question. And if they tell you to step back, don't move away from me, understand?" She nodded quickly. They stepped into the open, walking toward the nearest dropship. A soldier at the checkpoint noticed them and stepped forward, his weapon held loosely but ready. His visor flipped up, revealing a stern face. "Who's this?" he asked, eyeing Liora. "My responsibility," Kade replied without hesitation. "She's with me," the soldier frowned. "Orders are clear, no unregistered non-human passengers. Too much risk of infiltration." "She's not a threat," Kade said firmly. "She's a survivor. I'm bringing her in." The other soldier hesitated, glancing toward an officer nearby. The officer, a woman with short-cropped hair and sharp eyes, walked over. She looked Liora up and down, her expression unreadable. "Name?" the officer asked. "Liora," she said softly. The officer studied her face for a moment longer, then looked at Kade. "You're vouching for her?" "I am," he said without hesitation. A few seconds passed in silence. Then the officer gave a short nod. "Get her on board. But she stays in your unit section until we reach safe space." Kade's shoulders eased slightly. "Understood." They moved quickly, climbing the short ramp into the dropship. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of metal and oil. Rows of seats lined the walls, and a few tired civilians glanced up as they entered. Kade guided Liora to a seat near the back and handed her a safety harness. She fumbled with the straps, and he leaned over to help secure them. When the engines roared to life, the dropship shook, rising off the ground. Liora gripped the straps tightly, her eyes wide as the ground fell away beneath them. She had never flown before. Kade glanced at her, his expression calm. "You're safe now," he said quietly. The dropship climbed higher, leaving the ruined city and war-torn land far below. Through the small window beside her, Liora saw the faint curve of the planet and the dark stretch of space above. She pressed her fingers lightly to the glass, as if making sure it was real. For the first time in weeks, she could no longer smell the smoke of burning buildings. The constant noise of the battlefield was gone, replaced by the steady hum of the ship's engines. But even with this peace, her mind could not settle. She was among strangers who didn't know her, and she could feel their eyes watching. Kade sat beside her, calm and quiet. He noticed how she kept her shoulders tense, ready to pull away if anyone came too close. "Ignore them," he said softly. "They don't know you yet." She nodded but didn't look away from the window. She could still remember the disgust on people's faces when they had avoided her in the city. That memory would not fade easily. After a while, the officer who had allowed her on board walked down the narrow aisle. She stopped near Kade, her eyes moving between him and Liora. "Command will want to know why you brought her," she said. "She would have died," Kade replied simply. "That's not the point," the officer said. "Survivors like her, they're not always what they seem. You understand the risk?" "I understand it better than most," Kade said, his voice steady. The officer gave a short nod and moved on, but Liora had heard every word. She lowered her gaze to her lap, wondering if she truly belonged here. The dropship finally docked with a larger vessel, a human military transport. As the ramp lowered, warm white lights spilled into the cabin. The air smelled cleaner here, almost sharp. Soldiers guided the civilians toward assigned sections. Kade stayed close, leading Liora through the wide metal corridors. People they passed glanced at her, some with open curiosity, others with suspicion. She kept her eyes forward, matching Kade's pace. They reached a small private room with 2 bunks, a narrow table, and a sealed storage unit. "You can use the lower bed," Kade said, setting his gear down. Liora touched the blanket cautiously, surprised at how soft it felt. "This is for me?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "You'll stay here until I figure out what comes next." He left for a while to report to his command, and Liora sat alone in the quiet room. She traced the edge of the blanket, then glanced around at the walls, the floor, the strange human devices she didn't understand. It was nothing like her home, but it was safe. When Kade returned, he carried a small tray of food, a simple meal from the ship's supply. "Eat," he said, placing it on the table. She took slow bites, tasting real food for the first time in days. It felt strange to be cared for without having to fight for it. Later, as the ship moved through the dark, Kade sat across from her. "You'll need to tell me everything you remember about what happened to your home," he said. Liora hesitated. "Why?" "Because if you're with us, I need to know what dangers might follow you," he explained. Her golden eyes lowered, and she began to speak. She told him about the attack on her settlement, the ships that came without warning, the fire that swallowed the streets, the friends she lost. Her voice stayed quiet, but every word was sharp with memory. When she finished, Kade leaned back. "No one should have to go through that," he said. She met his eyes for the first time in minutes. "But you found me," she said softly. He gave a small nod. "And I'm not done yet," he replied. The next day, the transport ship was quiet except for the soft hum of its engines. Liora had woken early, sitting on the edge of her bunk with her bare feet touching the cold floor. She kept listening for sounds outside the room, unsure of people on the ship still doubted her. When Kade returned from his duties, his face was more serious than before. He closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. "There's a problem," he said. Her chest tightened. "What kind?" "Some of the crew think you might be a spy," he said plainly. "They've seen too much in this war to trust easily. Command hasn't decided what to do with you yet." Liora's fingers twisted in the blanket. "And if they decide I can't stay, they'll send you back to a refugee camp on the surface," he said. "And right now, those camps are barely surviving." She stared at him, her heart sinking. "Then I'll die there," she whispered. Kade's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp. "That's why I'm not letting that happen." He reached into his pocket and took out a small silver tag, a soldier's ID. "This marks you as under my protection," he explained. "As long as I'm responsible for you, no one can move you without my say." She took the tag carefully, the cool metal warming in her hand. "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because when I found you, everyone else looked away," he said. "I'm not built to walk past someone who needs help." Later, Kade took her to a different part of the ship. The halls here were busier, with soldiers and crew moving between stations. Liora stayed close to his side, feeling the weight of every stare that landed on her. In the training deck, he handed her a canteen. "You'll stay here with me for a while. If you can learn some basics, it'll help them see you're not a key threat." She followed his instructions, practicing simple drills, nothing like the advanced training of soldiers, but enough to show she could listen, learn, and keep up. Sweat formed on her forehead, but she didn't complain. As the hours passed, one of the soldiers watching from the corner stepped forward. "She's quick," the man said to Kade. "Didn't think an alien like her would be." Liora didn't understand every word, but she caught the tone. It wasn't hostile. It was almost surprised. Kade gave a short reply. "She's tougher than she looks." That night, back in the small room, Liora sat holding the silver tag. "Today felt different," she said quietly. "Some of them didn't look at me like they wanted me gone." Kade nodded. "Respect is earned. You're starting to earn it." But just as things seemed to shift, the calm of the transport ship broke. A sudden alarm blared through the corridors, the lights flashing red. Kade was already on his feet, pulling on his armor. "What's happening?" Liora asked, her voice rising. "Enemy ships," he said quickly. "Stay here, lock the door, and don't open it for anyone but me." She reached out and caught his arm. "Be careful." He gave a small, firm nod before disappearing into the hall. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Liora sat by the door, listening to the distant echoes of movement and muffled voices. Then the floor beneath her shook with the impact of something hitting the ship. She pressed her hands to the wall, her breath quick and shallow. A loud crash sounded from farther down the hall, followed by heavy footsteps. She could hear shouting, not in the human language. Her heart pounded. The lock on her door beeped once, then twice. "Liora!" Kade's voice came through, steady but urgent. "It's me. Open up." She hurried to the panel and unlocked it. The door slid open, revealing him, helmet dented, armor scuffed, but alive. "They've boarded the ship," he said. "We need to move, now." Without hesitation, she grabbed the silver tag and followed him into the flashing red light of the corridor. The corridor shook as another impact rocked the transport ship. Emergency lights flashed red across the walls, and the air smelled faintly of burnt metal. Kade moved quickly, keeping his body between Liora and the danger ahead. His rifle was ready, his voice low but firm. "Stay close, don't stop," he told her. They passed 2 human soldiers guarding a junction. "Boarders in Section C," one of them called to Kade. "They're pushing toward engineering." Kade nodded. "I'll take her to the safe bay." But when they turned the next corner, the path was blocked. 3 enemy soldiers in dark armor had forced their way in, their weapons raised. They were not human, their faces hidden behind insect-like masks, their voices clicking as they barked orders. Before Kade could fire, one of the boarders noticed Liora. The alien's stance shifted, and it spoke in her language. The words were sharp, commanding. Liora froze. "What is it saying?" Kade asked. "They want me to come with them," she said quietly. "They say they know what I am." Kade's voice hardened. "You're not going anywhere." The enemy soldier took a step forward, its weapon lowering slightly as if expecting her to comply. Liora's gaze darted between the masked faces and Kade. For most of her life, she had been treated as something unwanted, a burden, a problem to be ignored. But now, for the first time, someone had stood in front of her to shield her. Something inside her shifted. She stepped closer to Kade, her chin lifting. "I'm staying," she said firmly in her own language, so they would understand. The enemy soldier's body stiffened. In that moment, Kade fired. The hallway erupted in sharp bursts of sound, the red lights flashing against the smoke. When it was over, the boarders lay still on the floor. "Move," Kade urged, taking her hand again. They ran through the corridors, the sound of distant fighting echoing behind them. Finally, they reached the safe bay, a reinforced chamber where a small group of civilians and injured crew were gathered. A medic moved toward them, checking for wounds. Kade stayed near the door, speaking quickly with the officer in charge. Liora sat on a bench, her hands trembling. She looked down at the silver tag still hanging around her neck. It felt heavier. Now, not just a mark of protection, but a promise that had been kept. When the fighting ended hours later, the crew slowly returned to their stations. The boarding party had been repelled, but the ship bore fresh scars from the attack. Kade finally joined her, removing his helmet. He looked exhausted, but there was a small, rare smile on his face. "You did well," he said. "I didn't do anything," she replied softly. "You chose to stay," he said. "That matters." The officer who had once doubted her approached. She studied Liora for a moment, then spoke. "Kade tells me you refused to go with them, that you stood your ground." Liora nodded. "Then maybe I was wrong," the officer said. "We'll make space for you here, under his watch, but you've earned your place." The words sank into Leora's chest like warmth spreading through cold air. For so long, she had been alone, carrying the weight of rejection. Now, for the first time, she felt part of something bigger than herself. Days later, the transport ship entered safe space. Through the viewing deck's wide glass, Liora saw a massive human station orbiting a bright blue world. It was alive with movement, ships docking, lights blinking, and people walking freely. Kade stood beside her. "Welcome to your new home," he said. She turned to him. "It's not just the place," she said quietly. "It's because you were there." He gave a short nod, his eyes on the station ahead. "Then let's make sure you never have to be alone again." As the transport drifted toward the station, Leora's reflection in the glass showed someone she barely recognized. Not the unwanted girl hiding in ruins, but someone standing beside a soldier who had chosen to see her when no one else would.